French soldiers opened fire on a crowd celebrating the end of World War II. The date was May 8, 1945. The crime was carrying an Algerian flag. In the town of Stif, 100 miles west of Constantine in northeastern Algeria, thousands of Algerians had gathered for a victory march. They had fought and bled for France across North Africa, Italy, and southern France. Now, as Europe celebrated the defeat of Nazi Germany, they dared to believe liberation might extend to them. But what unfolded over the next several days would be buried so thoroughly that most of the world has never heard a word of it, and the full truth, when it finally surfaced, would reveal something far darker than a single massacre. This is the story of what France did on the day it celebrated freedom. And it is the story of what happened 2 years later on an island in the Indian Ocean, when the pattern repeated on an even larger scale. The morning of May 8th began with hope. Algerians in Stif organized a peaceful procession to mark VE Day, the formal end of the war in Europe. Shops closed, families gathered in the streets, scout groups carried banners praising the Allied victory, and among those banners, young nationalists raised the green and white Algerian flag alongside signs reading "Free Algeria" and "We want to be your equals." French police had one order: no nationalist symbols. When a 26-year-old named Bouzid Saal refused to lower the Algerian flag, a French officer shot him dead. He collapsed in the street, and the procession erupted into chaos. Panicked marchers scattered. Some attacked European settlers in the surrounding area. By the end of that first day, 103 European colonists were dead. What followed was not a crackdown. It was collective punishment on a scale that would not be fully documented for decades. The French response was immediate, coordinated, and indiscriminate. General Raymond Duval, commanding the Constantine Division, received authorization to restore order by any means. He deployed infantry, Foreign Legion units, and Senegalese tirailleurs across the Stif, Guelma, and Karata regions. But the military was only part of it. Armed settler militias, the colons, formed their own execution squads and operated with complete impunity. In Guelma, the sub-prefect André Acciari distributed weapons to European civilians and organized vigilante groups that rounded up Algerian men from their homes. Bodies were burned in lime kilns outside the city to destroy evidence. In the Karata Gorge, soldiers lined up villagers along the cliffs and shot them, letting the bodies tumble into the ravine below. The cruiser Duguay-Trouin shelled coastal settlements from the Mediterranean. Aircraft from the French Air Force strafed rural villages where no armed resistance had occurred at all. The killing lasted from May 8 through May 13 and beyond. The official French estimate at the time placed the Algerian death toll at 1,020, but that number was a fabrication, and the real count would remain hidden behind classified documents for the rest of the 20th century. How many Algerians died at Stif, Guelma, and Karata? The answer depends on who is counting and what they are willing to admit. The French government's initial figure of 1,020 was contradicted almost immediately. American diplomatic cables from the time estimated 6,000. Algerian sources placed the number far higher. In 2005, the Algerian ambassador to France publicly stated the toll at 45,000. Historians like Jean-Louis Planche and Jean-Pierre Péroulou, working with fragmentary records, have placed credible estimates between 8,000 and 20,000. The mass graves at Karata and the lime kilns at Guelma made precise accounting impossible, which was exactly the point. General Duval reportedly told the colonial administration after the massacres, "I have given you peace for 10 years. If France does not act, it will all start again, but next time it will be worse and possibly irreversible." He was almost exactly right about the timeline, but what no one in Paris seemed to grasp was that Stif did not prevent a revolution, it guaranteed one. 2 years after Stif, France faced another colonial uprising, this time 5,000 miles away. On the night of March 29, 1947, members of the Mouvement démocratique de la Rénovation Malgache launched a revolt against French rule on Madagascar, an island colony France had held since 1896. The insurrection began in the eastern provinces around Moramanga and Mananjari. armed with spears, machetes, and a small number of stolen rifles, the rebels attacked military outposts, rail lines, and colonial settlements. Within days, they had seized several towns and disrupted French control across a wide stretch of the island's east coast. Around 200 French soldiers and settlers were killed in the initial attacks. The colonial administration's response would make Stif look restrained. France sent 18,000 troops to Madagascar, including Foreign Legion units and colonial soldiers from North and West Africa. The campaign they waged over the following 21 months was not a counterinsurgency. It was a war of extermination directed at the civilian population. Villages suspected of harboring rebels were burned. Men were thrown alive from aircraft over their home communities as a warning to others. Summary executions were carried out across the Eastern Highlands. French forces used collective punishment on a vast scale, destroying rice stores and blockading entire regions, forcing tens of thousands of civilians into the forest where they starved. The leader of the revolt, two MDRM deputies named Joseph Ravoahangji and Joseph Raseta, were arrested, tried in a show trial in 1948 and sentenced to death, later commuted to life imprisonment. The death toll was staggering. French authorities initially admitted to 11,000 dead. The Malagasy government and independent researchers later estimated the true figure at between 40,000 and 89,000. General Marcel de Coppet, the colony's high commissioner, was quietly recalled to France. No one was prosecuted. The dead were not named. France classified the records of both Stif and Madagascar for decades. This was not neglect. It was policy. In Algeria, the sub-prefect Achiari ordered the destruction of administrative records in Guelma within weeks of the massacre. Municipal death registers were altered. The lime kilns that consumed the evidence at Guelma were never excavated by French authorities. When Algeria won its independence in 1962 after 8 years of war, the new government enshrined Stif as a foundational atrocity, the day the revolution truly began. France, for its part, said nothing. It took 60 years. In February 2005, the French ambassador to Algeria, Hubert Collin de Verdière, described the events at Stif as an inexcusable tragedy. It was the first official French acknowledgement, not an apology, an acknowledgement. President Hollande went slightly further in 2012, recognizing that the repression had been a brutal and unfair act. Madagascar has received even less. The French state has never issued a formal statement on the 1947 massacres. The archives remain only partially opened. Researchers who have accessed them describe gaps, entire folders missing, pages removed, reports that reference other reports that no longer exist. Stif and Madagascar are not isolated events. They are the pattern. In 1945 and 1947, France fought to preserve an empire built on the premise that certain populations existed to serve, to labor, and to be silent. When those populations spoke, France answered with artillery, lime kilns, and aircraft. The men who marched in Stif on May 8, 1945, had earned the right to celebrate. Many had worn French uniforms at Monte Cassino and in Provence. They had liberated towns in France that their own towns would never resemble. And when they asked for the same freedom that France was celebrating that very morning, they were shot in the streets. Boussid Sall, the young man who refused to lower the flag, became the first casualty of a massacre that would claim thousands. His name is known in Algeria. It is virtually unknown in France. General Duval promised 10 years of peace. He delivered exactly that. In November 1954, the Algerian War of Independence began, a conflict that would consume over 1 million lives and end French Algeria forever. The veterans of Stif and their children were among the first to take up arms. They had not forgotten. They had been waiting. Some silences are enforced. Some are chosen. And some last only until the people who survived them decide to speak.